She looked me straight in the eye and loudly declared I was drunk and disorderly, to have security kick me out, just because she wanted my table for a famous TikToker. She had no idea that I was the only person in Seattle with the authority to sign the $2 million check to save this failing restaurant from bankruptcy. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The story truly begins about an hour before that incident, 7 o'clock on a Thursday evening. I was standing outside the Aurelian Room, watching the soft glow of Edison bulbs illuminate the restaurant's etched glass doors. The autumn air carried the scent of rain-soaked concrete and expensive cologne from the couple walking past me. Today, I wasn't Dorothy Campbell, Senior Acquisition Director at Halcyon Capital Group. I was a mysterious guest. I was here to execute the final mystery shopper step of our due diligence process. Playing the role of a diner in Seattle tech casual style, I wore dark, raw denim jeans worth $200 and a custom-tailored blazer in cream. My hair was pulled back in a casual ponytail, and I'd swapped my usual heels for leather ankle boots. In this city, that was exactly how tech millionaires dressed: understated wealth, nothing flashy. The kind of person who could afford to drop $500 on dinner without blinking. My objective was crystal clear: conduct a direct evaluation of this fine dining restaurant's operations, service quality, and management competence. The Aurelian Room was on the market for $2 million because it was hemorrhaging cash, 2 months behind on staff salaries, outstanding vendor debts piling up. The owners, Mr. and Mrs. Peterson, were desperate to sell and retire to Arizona before the whole thing collapsed. In the due diligence file sent to Halcyon, the general manager was listed simply as M. Fields. I'd reviewed the financials, the lease agreements, the inspection reports. Everything looked salvageable with proper management. The location was prime, right in the heart of downtown Seattle's restaurant district. The brand had prestige. The bones were good. It just needed an injection of capital and competent leadership. I pushed open the door, and the warmth of the restaurant enveloped me. Soft jazz played from hidden speakers. The scent of truffle oil and seared meat hung in the air. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light across white tablecloths and polished silverware. And then I saw her. When I walked into the lobby, I was stunned. Directing the staff right in front of me, gesturing with a leather-bound reservation book, was someone I knew all too well. The name tag on her lapel read clearly: Madeline Fields, General Manager. My heart skipped a beat, then hammered against my ribs. It was Madeline Campbell, my biological sister. Since we had cut off all contact 6 years ago, I had no idea my sister had married and changed her last name. The name on the paperwork hadn't raised a single red flag. M. Fields could have been anyone: Marcus, Michelle, Martin. Never in 1,000 scenarios had I imagined it would be her. To understand why this moment was so earth-shattering, I have to take you back 6 years. Back then, Madeline was 28 and wanted to open a small fashion boutique. She'd always had expensive taste, designer handbags, luxury skincare, trips to Paris for inspiration. But she'd never had the work ethic or business sense to actually fund that lifestyle herself. So she came to me with tears in her eyes and dreams in her voice, painting pictures of a chic little shop in Capitol Hill where she'd sell curated vintage pieces and emerging designer collections. At her pleading, and under relentless pressure from our parents who had always treated her like fragile crystal that needed protecting, I withdrew my entire savings, at the time $50,000, to give to her. It was everything I'd scraped together working 60-hour weeks at my first investment job. I made one condition: she had to provide me with a business plan. Something that showed she'd done the research, understood the market, had a strategy, Madeline promised. She swore on our grandmother's memory that she would make me proud, that this was her chance to finally prove herself. But Madeline took the money and blew it all on a 3-week luxury trip to the Amalfi Coast with her boyfriend and personal shopping sprees in Milan and Paris. When I saw the photos on her social media: champagne on a yacht, designer shopping bags piled high, 5-star hotels, my stomach turned. She'd been lying to me the whole time, claiming the withdrawals were market research costs and vendor deposits. When I found out the truth and demanded an explanation, Madeline made a huge scene. She showed up at our parents' house crying hysterically, telling them that I was stingy, controlling, and didn't care about my suffering sister. She claimed I'd given her the money as a gift and was now cruelly demanding it back, because I was jealous of her happiness. She said I couldn't stand to see her succeed or be loved. My parents, who had always favored Madeline, their beautiful, charming youngest daughter who could do no wrong, scolded me for being selfish. They said I was tearing the family apart over money. They told me I was the older sister, I should be more understanding, more generous, more forgiving. In that moment, standing in my childhood living room, while my mother looked at me with disappointment, and my father shook his head in disgust, I realized I was just an ATM in my family's eyes. A resource to be exploited, a convenient source of funding with no expectation of respect, accountability, or even basic honesty in return. I declared the $50,000 a loss, called it a breakup fee for ending my relationship with all of them, and I cut off contact to protect myself from being used again. Best decision I ever made. Within 2 years, I'd been promoted twice. Within 4 years, I'd made senior acquisition director. I'd rebuilt my savings, invested wisely, and created a life where I was valued for my competence, not my wallet. Back in the present, I stood frozen in the restaurant lobby, looking at my sister in her manager's suit. Charcoal gray, well-fitted, probably expensive. She looked older, harder. Her hair was cut in a sleek bob, and she wore the kind of makeup that took 30 minutes to apply but was supposed to look effortless. Madeline's face showed a flicker of surprise when she recognized me. Her eyes widened for just a second before her expression shifted into something cold and dismissive. She sneered, her gaze scanning me from head to toe, lingering on my jeans with obvious disdain. In her eyes, regardless of my style, I was still the failed, stingy older sister who could never be successful or wealthy. The boring one, the one who chose spreadsheets over socializing. The one who would never understand what it meant to truly live. She had no idea that I was here representing a firm with $300 million in assets under management. Instead of greeting me, she signaled sharply for another staff member to serve me, then turned on her heel and walked away without a word. Her heels clicked authoritatively against the marble floor as she disappeared toward the kitchen. I suppressed my anger, my hands clenching briefly at my sides before I forced them to relax. I took a slow breath through my nose, centering myself. I reminded myself, today, I have a job to do. Stay professional, stay focused. This changes nothing about the evaluation. But I'd be lying if I said my heart wasn't racing. In stark contrast to Madeline's attitude, a waitress named Daisy approached me with genuine warmth and professionalism. She was young, maybe early 20s, with kind eyes and a nervous energy that suggested she hadn't been working here very long. Good evening. Welcome to the Aurelian Room, Daisy said, her smile reaching her eyes. Do you have a reservation with us tonight? Yes, under Collins, I replied, giving the alias my assistant had used when booking the table a week prior. Daisy checked the reservation book, running her finger down the list. Ah yes, Miss Collins. We have you at our VIP table this evening. Right this way, please. She led me through the main dining room, past tables where couples leaned close in intimate conversation and business associates clinked wine glasses over closed deals. The VIP table was positioned in a prime location visible enough to signal status, but tucked into a corner that offered privacy and a view of the entire restaurant. As I settled into the plush velvet chair, Daisy handed me the wine list and menu with practiced grace. Can I start you with something to drink? Our sommelier particularly recommends the 2015 Bordeaux this evening. It pairs beautifully with our beef Wellington. I'll take a glass of the Bordeaux, I said, appreciating her enthusiasm. And I'd love to hear your recommendations for dinner. Daisy's face lit up. She walked me through the menu with genuine knowledge, not just reciting descriptions but offering personal insights. The duck confit is incredible. It's been on the menu since the restaurant opened 15 years ago. But if you're feeling adventurous, the chef has a special tonight that's not listed. Pan-seared scallops with a saffron beurre blanc. I tried a taste during family meal, and it was stunning. I ordered both as courses, along with a starter of roasted beet salad. As Daisy walked away to place my order, I began my real work. Sitting at the VIP table, I pulled out my phone and opened the evaluation checklist I'd prepared. To anyone watching, I looked like another diner scrolling through messages. In reality, I was documenting everything. Ambiance, excellent. Lighting warm and flattering. Music at appropriate volume. Temperature comfortable. Decor sophisticated without being pretentious. Service, variable. Daisy was outstanding, attentive without hovering, knowledgeable, personable, but I'd already witnessed problematic behavior from management. Location: prime real estate. Great foot traffic, visible from the street, easy access to parking garages and public transit. Brand: strong. The Aurelian Room had reputation and history. It had been featured in Seattle Magazine 3 years ago as one of the city's top 10 fine dining experiences. But the cash flow was dying. The Petersons had made that clear in their disclosure documents. They'd taken out loans to cover operating costs. They'd deferred maintenance. They'd cut corners on ingredients. And now, sitting here, I understood part of the reason why. The manager here was unprofessional. I watched Madeline across the restaurant. She was hovering near the entrance, checking her phone repeatedly, her body language suggesting she was waiting for someone very important. Every few minutes, she'd adjust the flower arrangement on the host stand or straighten already straight menus. She snapped at a busboy who walked past with a tray, though I couldn't hear what she said. His shoulders hunched defensively. I vaguely realized the threat lay not just in the restaurant's weak financials, but in the operational mindset of this sister of mine. She was willing to sacrifice the experience of ordinary customers or people she personally disliked to chase after superficial recognition. She wanted the influencer photo, the social media mention, the appearance of success rather than the substance of it. That was a management philosophy that would sink any business eventually. About 15 minutes later, I was lifting my glass of red wine to my lips, preparing to take my first sip and appreciate the complex notes of cherry and tobacco, when Madeline suddenly appeared at my table. She didn't come to exchange pleasantries. She didn't come to acknowledge our shared history or the awkwardness of this encounter. Madeline's actions were incredibly fast and rough. She approached from my left side, holding a water pitcher in both hands. "Let me refill your water," she said loudly, her voice carrying to nearby tables. But instead of simply pouring water into my glass from a respectful distance, she deliberately invaded my personal space. She pressed close, her hip bumping against my shoulder as she leaned across the table. The movement was aggressive, invasive, designed to unsettle me. By natural reflex, I startled and recoiled, my body jerking away from the unexpected physical contact. My hand, the one holding the wineglass, flew outward to brace myself. My startle caused the wineglass in my hand to wobble, and the red liquid, which I hadn't even tasted yet, spilled over the rim. The Bordeaux splashed across the pristine white tablecloth, then cascaded onto my cream-colored blazer, staining the fabric in dark crimson blooms. The wine was cold against my skin, seeping through the fabric to my shirt beneath. I felt it spreading, the dampness uncomfortable and shocking. I looked up at her, my jaw tight with controlled anger. "Hey, watch out!" My voice was low, measured, just loud enough for her to hear, but not loud enough to cause a scene. I was acutely aware of the other diner's eyes turning toward us, drawn by the sudden movement. But Madeline didn't apologize. Not even a fake apology. Instead, she smirked, actually smirked, and deliberately spoke loudly for the surrounding customers to hear. "Ma'am, I was just trying to refill your water. You don't need to get so agitated. You're too drunk." The words hit me like a slap. The nearby tables went quiet. I could feel their judgment, their assumptions forming in real time. Drunk woman at the VIP table. How embarrassing. How tacky. I set down the empty wine glass carefully, my hand trembling slightly, not from intoxication, but from the effort it took to contain my rage. "I just arrived and haven't even finished one glass of red wine," I said, keeping my voice calm and factual. "You startled me by getting too close." Madeline leaned down, bringing her face close to my ear. To anyone watching, it might have looked like she was being solicitous, checking on a difficult guest. But her whisper was pure venom, delivered in a threatening tone while maintaining a fake customer service smile on the outside. "I am the law here. Leave now, or I call the police for public intoxication. I'd be very embarrassed if anyone here knew you were my sister." The threat was clear. She would humiliate me. She would have me arrested. She would do whatever it took to maintain her authority and remove me from her territory. My mind raced through options. I could argue. I could demand to speak to the owners. I could cause a scene that would expose her lies, but that would accomplish nothing except confirming the narrative she'd already constructed. It would make me look exactly like the out-of-control drunk she was claiming I was. Immediately after delivering her threat, Madeline stood up straight, smoothing her suit jacket. She turned toward the entrance where a security guard stood watching the dining room, and called out in a sharp, authoritative voice, "Please escort this guest out. She had too much to drink before arriving and is causing a disturbance." The security guard, a large man in a black suit, started walking toward our table. Other diners were openly staring now, some with sympathy, others with disgust. I heard whispered conversations starting around me. Daisy, the kind waitress who had served me so attentively, quickly walked over with worry written across her face. She knew the truth. She'd been there when I ordered. She'd poured the wine herself not 15 minutes ago. She knew full well I had only taken a sip, if that, and was completely sober. But, in the face of the general manager's authority, she didn't dare speak up. Daisy's eyes met mine, and I could see the apology there, the helplessness of someone who needed this job and couldn't afford to challenge her boss. I gave her a slight smile and nodded, a tiny gesture meant to signal that I was okay, that I didn't hold her powerlessness against her. This wasn't her fault. She was just trying to survive in a workplace run by a tyrant. I took a deep breath, centering myself. I was not allowed to lose my composure right now. Anger would only make me look like the drunkard Madeline was painting me to be. Emotion would be used as evidence against me. So instead, I became very, very calm. The kind of calm that comes from having a plan. The kind of calm that comes from knowing exactly how this story was going to end, even if my opponent didn't. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and felt something inside me go completely cold. Not hot anger, not hurt, just a detached, crystalline clarity. This wasn't about our past. This wasn't about the $50,000 or the family that had chosen her over me. This was about who we'd become in the 6 years since I'd walked away. I'd become someone who built things. Someone who created value. Someone who was trusted with million-dollar decisions because I'd proven myself competent and ethical. She'd become someone who would lie to customers, abuse her authority, and prioritize appearances over integrity. I used a napkin to dab at the wine staining my blazer, knowing it was futile. The damage was done. The cream fabric was ruined. I'd need to have it professionally cleaned, and even then, the stain might never fully come out. I picked up my handbag from where it rested against my chair leg. To everyone watching, I was a defeated guest, humiliated, and ready to slink away. The security guard had reached our table now, standing close enough to escort me out if needed. Madeline stood with her arms crossed, satisfaction radiating from her posture. She thought she had won. She thought she had kicked her poor sister out of her territory, had put me in my place, had proven once and for all who had the power here. But before leaving, I needed to confirm the ultimate motive. I needed to hear it from her lips, needed to understand the full scope of what she'd just done. Because if I was going to end her career, and I was absolutely going to end her career, I needed to know it was justified beyond any shadow of doubt. I leaned in close to my sister, close enough that my words wouldn't carry to the watching tables, and asked quietly, "Do you really hate me that much? Why didn't you just refuse me at the door?" For a moment, something flickered across Madeline's face, maybe surprise that I wasn't crying or arguing. But then, her expression hardened into pure triumph. She sneered, and the words came without hesitation, without any attempt to soften them. "The state's most famous food influencer is here. She didn't book a table, but it's my job to provide her with the most exclusive VIP table. In return, she'll post a story praising the restaurant for me. So there you have it, sister. I need a sister who brings me benefits, not a petty one like you. Oh, and by the way, you don't deserve to sit at a VIP table." There it was, the complete picture. She hadn't kicked me out because she hated me, though she clearly did. She'd kicked me out because I was in the way of what she wanted. A social media post. A moment of reflected glory from someone with 1 million followers, the illusion of success. She'd lied about a guest being intoxicated, had risked potential legal consequences for the restaurant, had created a hostile environment for her staff, and had destroyed any semblance of professional integrity, all for an Instagram story. Having said her piece, Madeline turned to Daisy, who was still standing nearby with her hands clasped anxiously in front of her apron. "Daisy, clear this table and get it ready for our real VIP guest. She'll be here in 10 minutes. Daisy nodded to show she understood, though her eyes still looked at me with guilt and sympathy. "Yes, Miss Fields." I stood, shouldering my bag. The security guard stepped aside to let me pass, though he stayed close, ready to intervene if I caused any trouble. I walked to the host stand at the entrance, where a young man was processing credit cards. "I'd like to pay for my wine," I said calmly. He looked confused. The manager said. "I ordered a glass of wine and I'd like to pay for it. Please." He processed the payment. $42 for a single glass of Bordeaux that I'd barely tasted, plus automatic gratuity. I paid with my personal card, not the Halcyon corporate card that would have raised questions, and took the receipt, folding it carefully and tucking it into my wallet. Then I walked out of the Aurelian room into the cool Seattle night. The rain had started while I was inside, typical autumn drizzle that made the streetlights reflect off the pavement in shimmering pools. I walked 2 blocks to where I'd parked my car, a modest but reliable sedan that didn't advertise wealth. I sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, the sound of rain pattering against the windshield the only noise. My hands were steady as I pulled out my laptop from the back seat and powered it on. This seemed like a humiliating defeat. Kicked out of a restaurant, clothes stained, slandered in front of a crowd of witnesses who would probably dine out on the story for weeks. The drunk woman at the VIP table. Did you see how she argued with the manager? So entitled. But Madeline didn't know, couldn't have known, because she'd never bothered to find out what I'd become, that this very triumph was the death sentence for her career. I understood that this wasn't just personal bullying. It was a massive operational risk. A general manager willing to slander a customer, to fabricate accusations of intoxication, to abuse her authority for social media clout that was someone who would eventually cause legal liability. Someone who would drive away good employees like Daisy. Someone who would tank customer satisfaction scores and destroy the restaurant's reputation. She had just handed me the most powerful weapon to end this deal on my terms. I opened a new document and began to type. Confidential Evaluation Report. Aurelian Room Acquisition. From Dorothy Campbell, Senior Acquisition Director. To CEO, Halcyon Capital Group. Date, today's date. Subject, critical management deficiencies identified during mystery shopper evaluation. My fingers flew across the keyboard, documenting everything with precise, professional language. I described the incident factually, without emotion. I included the cost of my ruined clothing. I noted the specific allegation Madeline had made, and the evidence that contradicted it. The receipt showing exactly 1 glass of wine ordered, the timestamps, the witness statements I would collect from Daisy if needed. I framed it not as personal revenge, but as a serious due diligence concern that directly impacted the restaurant's value and Halcyon's liability exposure. And then I made my recommendation. Acquisition should proceed only with immediate management changes and a reduced purchase price to offset reputational and legal risk. Recommended acquisition price, $1.8 million, a reduction of $200,000 from asking price. I attached my receipt. I attached photos of my stained clothing, time-stamped from the restaurant's parking lot. I attached excerpts from the due diligence file, showing M. Field's employment history, noting that she'd been with the restaurant for only 8 months, coinciding with the beginning of its financial decline. I read through the report 3 times, checking for any hint of personal bias or emotional language. There was none. It was a cold, professional assessment of a management failure that posed material risk to our investment. At 8:47 p.m., I hit send. The email disappeared into the digital void, winging its way to my CEO's inbox where it would wait until morning. The whoosh of the email leaving my outbox seemed louder than it should have been in the quiet car. Madeline thought she'd won tonight. She had no idea that she'd just lost everything. Then I opened a new message, this one private, addressed only to Christopher Hill, CEO of Halcyon Capital Group and my direct superior for the past 8 years. Christopher, I need to disclose a conflict of interest that arose during tonight's site visit. I have just discovered that M. Fields, the general manager of the Aurelian Room, is my estranged biological sister. We have not had contact in 6 years due to personal family matters. The conflict became apparent during the incident I documented in my formal report. However, I want to be absolutely clear. My professional assessment stands independent of our personal history. The operational failures I observed would warrant the same conclusion regardless of the manager's identity. Due to the personal connection, I respectfully recuse myself from the final acquisition decision. However, I stand by my assessment regarding operational risks and recommend Halcyon assign a secondary evaluator to verify my findings before proceeding. I am available to discuss this matter further at your convenience. Dorothy Campbell. I sent that one too. Then I closed my laptop and sat in the silence. The wine stain on my blazer had started to dry, leaving a darker patch that would probably never come out completely. $400 for this blazer. Ruined. I could buy 10 more without thinking about it, but that wasn't the point. A strange, uncomfortable feeling rose within me, something hollow and aching in my chest. But it wasn't because I'd been kicked out. It wasn't because she'd humiliated me in front of strangers. I was sad because my sister was still that same person. 6 years had passed, and she hadn't changed at all. Still choosing image over substance. Still prioritizing what looked good over what was right. Still hurting people without a second thought because they didn't fit into her perfectly curated world. I'd given her $50,000 once, believing she'd grow up. Believing she'd learn. Tonight proved I'd been wrong. I started my car and drove home through Seattle's empty streets, the city lights blurring past my windows. The next morning, my phone rang at 6:47 a.m. I was in my kitchen, still in my pajamas, when Chris's name flashed across the screen. Dorothy. His voice was tense. I've reviewed your report. I'm sending Marcus to complete the evaluation. But between you and me, you just saved us a nightmare. The Petersons called me 20 minutes ago. Apparently your sister was fired this morning. That fast? I kept my voice neutral. Mr. Peterson was livid. Said he'd received calls from 2 other customers who had similar experiences with her, one last month, one 2 weeks ago. Your report was the final straw. He terminated her for gross misconduct. No severance, no reference letter. I closed my eyes. Understood. Get some rest, Dorothy, you've earned it. I'll handle things from here. After we hung up, I stood at my kitchen window, looking out at Puget Sound in the distance. The water was gray-blue in the early morning light, calm and endless. Madeline was unemployed. In a city where the hospitality industry was tightly networked, where general managers talked and reputations spread fast, she'd be lucky to get a hostess position after this. I should have felt triumphant, victorious. Instead, I just felt tired. 1 month later, Seattle was transitioning into fall. The leaves on the trees lining my street had turned copper and gold, and there was a crispness in the air that made me pull my favorite cardigan tighter as I walked to my car each morning. Halcyon Capital Group had completed the acquisition of the Aurelian Room 3 days ago. The paperwork sat in a leather portfolio on my desk, stamped and signed, official and final. The final price, $1.8 million. Marcus had conducted the follow-up evaluation and confirmed everything in my report. The Petersons, desperate and with limited leverage after the management scandal became known, had accepted Halcyon's revised offer, $200,000 less than their asking price. $200,000 in savings that Christopher had specifically credited to my thorough due diligence and risk assessment. There was talk of a bonus, a promotion maybe to vice president of acquisitions. I should have been celebrating. Instead, I was sitting in my home office on a Wednesday afternoon when my phone vibrated on the desk, a text message from an unknown number. But I recognized it immediately. I'd never deleted it from my old contacts, even after 6 years of silence. Madeline. My thumb hovered over the screen. I could delete it without reading. Block the number, move on. But I opened it. The first message appeared. You venomous snake. You knew what that report would do. Another one came through. I lost everything because of you. My job, my reputation, my career. All because you couldn't let go of the past. Then another. You're pathetic. Coming to my restaurant in your cheap jeans, playing dress up like you're some kind of mystery shopper. You orchestrated this whole thing just to ruin my life. And finally, I hope you're proud of yourself, Dorothy. You've always been jealous of me. This is who you really are, a bitter, vindictive person who destroys family out of spite. I read each message twice. 3 times. The words were so familiar, the deflection, the blame shifting, the complete inability to see her own role in any of it. She was still playing the victim. Still convinced that the world was wrong and she was right. You orchestrated this whole thing. I almost laughed. If I'd orchestrated it, I would have planned to run into her? To be humiliated in front of a restaurant full of people? To have wine thrown on me like I was some kind of problem to be dealt with? No, I'd just shown up to do my job. She'd done the rest herself. I thought about not responding, just letting the silence be my answer. But I'd been silent for 6 years, and where had that gotten me? She still hadn't learned, still hadn't grown, still thought the world owed her something just for existing. I typed a response, my fingers steady on the screen. I didn't fire you. I just reported how you treated a customer wearing jeans. You fired yourself. I hit send before I could second guess it, then I turned off my phone completely. The screen went black, and with it, the last thread connecting me to the sister I used to have. I walked to my kitchen and made tea chamomile with honey, something my mother used to make when I was young. The steam rose from the cup, fragrant and soothing. I carried it to my living room and sat by the window, watching the Seattle skyline in the distance. Somewhere out there, Madeline was probably furious. Probably texting more hateful messages to my dead phone. Probably calling our mother if she still talked to her to complain about how unfair life was, how her terrible sister had sabotaged her. But that wasn't my problem anymore. For 6 years, I'd carried the weight of our broken relationship like a stone in my chest. Wondering if I'd been too harsh, cutting her off over money. Wondering if I should reach out, try to mend things, be the bigger person. Tonight proved I'd been right to walk away. Some people don't change. Some people go through their entire lives blaming everyone else for their problems, never looking in the mirror, never taking responsibility. Madeline was one of those people. She always had been. And I was done trying to save her from herself. I took a sip of my tea and thought about the hospitality industry, the world Madeline had chosen, the world I evaluated and analyzed from the outside. In hospitality, you can judge a manager's character not by how they treat VIP guests, but by how they treat the guests they don't know. The ones who show up in jeans and sneakers. The ones who order modestly. The ones who look ordinary. Because those guests are the real test. Anyone can smile and bow for a celebrity, for an influencer, for someone who can boost your social media presence. That's easy. That's self-serving. But treating every customer with respect, regardless of what they wear or how they look or what they can do for you, that takes character. That takes integrity. Madeline had failed that test spectacularly. I smiled into my teacup, feeling lighter than I had in years. My phone stayed off for the rest of the evening. Tomorrow, I'd turn it back on and block her number permanently. I'd forward her messages to my attorney, just in case documentation, nothing more. But tonight, I just sat in my quiet apartment and felt free. Halcyon was already interviewing candidates, people with actual hospitality experience, people who understood that every customer deserved respect. Madeline would have to find her own way forward. And I would finally, truly, move on with mine.